Louis the Fourth. So yeah, Louis the 14th is most. He is the most. But he is. He's inseparable from French Baroque. So the idea was France was becoming the dominant country in, like, the dominant nation in Western Europe, and sort of rivaling the English and the Prussians and the Austrians. And so part of this was that they became wealthy through conquest, and also, as just about every nation a lot of the European nations at this time, they became wealthy through their colonies. The Spanish, for example, were extremely wealthy because of precious metal mines that they controlled in South America. Like Argentina is, well, Argento is silver. So silver was a very you see it in the French Baroque, furniture, planters, just objects made of solid silver. So wealth and really the opulence of the monarch. One of the things that this did, mirrors. So the ability to create larger and larger mirrors was really pushed along by the demands of the monarch. And with a lot of things in furniture, glass, mirrors, I think you can give credit to Louis XIV and his minister of furniture. They had a ministry for, like, furnishings as a part of the French government. That they really did a lot to push the innovation, because without that, a lot of money and also the demand for high quality products, it's unlikely that it would have been that, that if things would have been, I guess, as good. Okay. So Louis XIV died in 1715, and he was succeeded by Louis XV, his great-grandson. Louis XIV was monarch for such a long time that his sons and grandsons, he was still alive when they reached adulthood, and so they ended up getting married, or taking over territories in other parts of Europe. And so Louis XV, his grandson, let me show you this. Here we are. Share my screen. Sorry for the delay here. All right. So the late Baroque is often referred to as the Rococo. It's a very brief period of about 3 decades where after Louis XIV's death, here he is. So Louis XV, 1710 to 1774, great grandson of Louis XIV. Here he is as monarch in his spectacular robes with the fleur-de-lis. It's, in terms of politics and foreign policy, he's considered to have really squandered the success of Louis XIV, and he just enjoyed the fact that he was the monarch of a very wealthy nation. So the to let's see. So here is a painting by Francois Boucher, Coffee in the Closet, 1739, with some contemporary furnishings. This japanned tea table and woodwork. Japanning is a technique that was meant to imitate lacquer. There are a couple of the Europeans became they had come into contact with Asia, China, and Japan in particular, and a lot of the like furnishings in like Chinese furnishings and Japanese furnishings were very interesting and exotic. But the Japanese and the Chinese did things that the Europeans didn't know how to do yet, or that they couldn't do as well. Lacquer is one of them. Lacquering is a very challenging thing to do, like truly, like really, like real, like like traditional lacquering, because it takes layers and layers of it. Painting in like a glossy oil-based paint, like black oil-based paint, was a way to imitate the appearance of lacquer. Okay, so Louis XV moved the French court back to Paris, and here are these hotels that the nobility called hotels that the French nobility lived in, really like these urban estates. So this interior of this salon in the Hotel de Soubise in Paris, this is from during the reign of Louis XV. You can see what's the ornament that's up along, like just like that goes like up the wall, along this like really elaborate cornice at the ceiling, and up to just like over like the ceiling. Very kind of wispy and spindly, very similar to some of the Baroque ornament, but it's a bit it's thinner. You can also see that with like the chandelier that's in the center, you need a high ceiling for chandeliers like this. I want to go to here. Here are some designs for chimney, like the chimney piece millwork in the Royal Palace. This is a engraving of a mirror workshop. So Louis XV continues the creation, like he continues using and patronizing these workshops to produce furnishings for the for the for the French monarch and for the other nobilities. So here is an engraving of an interior, a private concert, 1773. Um, so one reason I show you these because this gives you some idea of what this looked like. Like this is more like this was made in this made in the 18th century. So this is a contemporary image of what a French interior, what this interior looked like. Console table. So a console table. This is something that was really originated in the Baroque, the earlier Baroque period. Um, so two legs, and it's attached to the wall. So it's really like meant to be an extension. So it's meant to project away from the wall and not sit free of the wall. And then above it would be, you can see just at the top of this picture, there's a picture frame and there's a mirror. Usually what they would do is you'd have a console table and a mirror above it, mounted to the wall. So, and it was a place where you might have an arrangement of objects, curiosities, little like porcelain figurines and things like that on the table. It was really like the mirrors were used a lot as a way of amplifying light and space. We all know that if mirrors can make a space feel bigger because it reflects the interior and it looks like you've got more space, even though you don't. So the French were doing this back into the Baroque period. So one thing that separates the Rococo from the Baroque is that the Rococo or the late Baroque is often not symmetrical or asymmetrical. So you can see this like the stretcher. A stretcher is like a structural piece that runs between legs on a piece of furniture. Usually it's applied to chairs. You can see this ornament that of these like waves and scrolls, that it's not symmetrical. And you can see just above the that marble top, also it's not symmetrical. So there on the left is a Louis XIV console. That is a more symmetrical. Yeah, and it's not that you can't find. It's not as if symmetry never existed in the Rococo period. Like here is one, but the ornament, it starts to get even like the ends of this, like what looks like the scrolls and leaves and shells that are kind of growing and getting kind of spindly. It seems a little bit even more like the end of a vine or something. Okay. So here, this candelabra by Meissonier, it looks kind of twisted, doesn't it? Like it was almost like it's just like been twisted by hand. And it's not symmetrical. It's very organic. So organic and asymmetrical, those are two things that are features of the Rococo. Oh, there's an engraving of a silverware table setting by Meissonier. There. So here with some of these like objects, you get into some of the more obvious features of Rococo. A soup tureen, which is like a I guess like a serving bowl. So what do you tell me? Like, what kinds of things do you see in this object?
Leaves.
Leaves, yes. Leaves,
A wave.
a wave,
Shells.
shells, definitely. There's also a crayfish crawling on top of it.
I didn't know if that was an insect
Yeah,
or
it's
what that was.
yeah, it's yeah. So they this kind of earthy. There were this the Rococo used this earthy and organic, like I guess sort of imagery with some of its objects, specifically like porcelain and silver. So this is like I mean it's very beautiful, sculptural, but very I don't know it's very unique, I think you could say. So there's breaking wave. That is so this sort of breaking wave is a feature of Rococo stuff. And here, this is I threw this slide in here because the Guggenheim in Bilbao, Spain, which was built in like finished in the mid '90s. Um, Frank Gehry is he's still alive, getting near the he's getting I think he's in his 90s now. But the there's something similar in a way to this modern architecture and sort of this sort of like attraction that they had in the late Baroque for this sort of like organic wave. So here's some soft paste porcelain. And so tell me what kinds of things do you see here? I see a sturgeon, crayfish, shells, rocks, dirt, mud. I love this. The artist in me really loves this because it's strange. Like uh, it's beautifully painted, but it's like dead fish or just like fish kind of like slapped on a rock or a grotto. So there's this like you can see there's this like little like fountain. So it's a grotto, um, rocks, fish. Um, I think it's interesting because it's like it's surprising. No, it's a little I don't know, not necessarily what I want on my dinnerware, but whatever like you guys go for it. Okay, so here a commode, which is a cabinet like storage. The lid might open. Um, so and has anyone ever heard of a toilet referred to as a commode? Do you know why they call this a commode? It's where you put the. It's where you store the bucket. So like it wouldn't be this one. This is too nice. But like you know, indoor plumbing didn't exist yet, and so like a commode was also a term applied to like something that was like uh, related to toilet. So my understanding is they could have like a bucket that would be stored inside the commode. This one is probably not used for that. This has some very nice sculpture and marquetry. It's got some nice of that ormolu, which is those metallic mounts on the corners, on the edges of the furniture that were like a bronze or brass or something like that, but then fired in a kiln with vaporized mercury to make them shine like gold. And it is a very harmful process to the person that makes it. So this idea, you can see that there's what might be called an Asian theme to the imagery on the front of on the surface of the commode. Looks like it's largely painted with sculptural aspects to it. The term chinoiserie is a French term, and it would literally mean like Chinese, or Chinese-ish, or Chinesing. They didn't, it was fashionable to make things look what they considered to be Asian, Chinese, what might have been called Oriental, which just means Eastern. And sometimes like some of the decorative arts that are done in this, like that show, like, that are examples of chinoiserie, will include Turkish, Chinese, Japanese, and Indian motifs, and all in the same thing. So it was really, it was fashionable that it looked like it comes from somewhere east of Europe, but it might not have mattered how accurate it was. It just had to look. It had to look the part. This was a period of time when a lot of like furniture was being brought to Europe from China, and some Chinese craftsmen, probably all craftsmen. I'm not sure how many women. There no doubt were women involved in it too. So we'll say craftspeople that could do lacquering, that could make true porcelain, that could design, like they could build some of the furniture the way they wanted it. Now, your guy, Mr. Smith here, in the Furniture, A Concise History book, does tell you that sometimes what they would do is import pieces from China and then cut them up so that they looked like they looked more like they were European in terms of their configuration. So they were interested in it they were interested in having imported furniture, but they had no problem chopping it up to make it look more the way they wanted it to look. Okay. Louis XV commode. Interestingly, the earlier one looks more elaborate and refined. Although, with these examples being centuries old, it can be hard to. It's maybe not a fair comparison, depending on what each piece of furniture has been through. Okay, here is a interesting cabinet from Venice, which is northeastern Italy, from around the same time. And so these, you know, you can see regionally in a way. This, to me, this looks a little, still looks a little bit medieval. Venice is a unique place, but still using a lot of the same, really using a lot of the same ornament. And here is a roll-top desk with marquetry. We saw the process of that video with the process of marquetry last time. All right, so here's some chairs. So this term fauteuil is an armchair that is that the space beneath the arms is open. This is a Louis XIV walnut fauteuil. Here is a Louis XV. So the Louis XIV, Louis XV, Louis XVI, they all got their own kind of like commissioned their own furniture. And there are there's different styles associated with different monarchs. So this one, the Louis XV, to me looks like a more modern chair. This still looks a teeny bit medieval to me. I mean, the upholstery is old, but the way that walnut is carved, it seems heavy and dark. Like it's got something. It's always come across as seeming a little like older. So here, fauteuil à la reine, which is literally à la reine refers to the queen. In furniture, it's a low fauteuil. Hey. And here, this a marquise. This is also a type of chair that is called a bergère. Bergere with an accent over this second E, a bergère. And that's where the upholstery, it's upholstered beneath the arms. So it just encloses the space. The bergère, the design of the bergère is it's a little bit deeper and a little bit wider than a fauteuil. Yes, bergère, Bergere. Hey, Elliot just made the mouse scroll with his tail. Beautiful upholstery fabric. There. So this is getting later, like late in the Louis XV. So here is a pliant or a folding stool. This is from the era of Louis XV. There was a similar pliant used by Louis XIV. This is a little bit more elaborate. So there are different kinds of like sofas, chairs, and what we now refer to as a chaise lounge, which a chaise lounge is really like it's a long chair. Take the seat, extend the seat, and you have a chair that is now like a couch. So here, so there were experiment, like sort of like people they would experiment with different ideas for like how you can how can you make some cool piece of furniture really. This is a bergère with a long ottoman, which is kind of like turns it into a chaise. A canapé is a sofa. A cane sofa. So this caning with the way that back is done, that is the caning is something that comes by way of India. Another wider sofa with more legs for support. So the difference between a couch and a sofa is the sofa has a back and a couch doesn't. Couch can have sides, but a couch doesn't have a back. Right? More contemporary painting. And damask is a kind of like a fabric that is two-sided. All right, here we'll get into some more porcelain. So the porcelain is important. Well, I guess in terms of it's like the relationship between the Europeans and the Chinese, the porcelain is important because soft paste porcelain is the European imitation of Chinese porcelain. The true porcelain uses a clay with feldspar, which is a mineral that allows it to, like, you can fire it at a higher temperature and it hardens. It conducts heat very well, and it's more durable than this. The soft paste porcelain, at first, the Europeans tried to imitate Chinese porcelain. They couldn't do it. They ended up replacing, substituting ground glass for the feldspar mineral, and they were able to make something that was like porcelain, but it fires at a lower temperature and it is more brittle, so it would break more easily. And so it was not as desirable when it was being made. What's sort of like I guess it's a quirk of the historical aspect of it, because soft paste porcelain was not as durable. It's more valuable now because there's less of it around. So the hard paste porcelain is what is what the Chinese developed, and soft paste is the European imitation. Um, just looking at this, it's organic. Nature is a well, nature is sort of like this sort of like imitation of natural forms, vines and leaves and flowers growing over the surface of the vase. All right, so this potpourri vase, very interesting. It's really a beautiful object, and you can see the way the ornament flows over the surface. It almost seems like it's been kind of stretched and pulled, which really I think it this that sort of that characteristic does appear in the in Rococo work, where it really looks um, you know like it's growing. It's been kind of like just like it looks very animated. Hmm. And this is from the Sèvres, which is a porcelain manufactory that was one of the many workshops that was um, supported, like really created and supported by the French government.
So I'm just curious, why didn't they do it the same way as the Chinese with the feldspar?
Well, at first they couldn't figure it out, and at first, from what I understand, the Chinese were very protective of their methods, and they just thought, well, the Europeans don't have a very good um, track record of interacting with uh, cultures in Asia, in Africa, in the Americas, really pretty much anywhere. And so the from what I understand, the Chinese just said like, well, no, we're not going to tell you, and you probably won't be able to do it anyway because you're clumsy and you're loud and you're unrefined. Which I think for in a lot of cases, I can agree with. I can agree with that. Um, if like for example, like there's I remember reading about this in history, history classes where it was there was this war that the English fought with the Chinese called the Opium War. And if you have any of you ever heard of it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you what can you tell us about the Opium?
So they wanted the Chinese, the Europeans wanted the Chinese to actually manufacture it and supply it to them, but it actually hinders their own agriculture in a way. So um, the Chinese fought back, and it was like the war is called as an opium war.
So the war was it was the English trying to force the Chinese to manufacture opium for the English.
Yeah, it was like they tried to manufacture, like in India itself, they tried to even have like cotton
Yes.
was forced to be manufactured in India. So that was another. So they tried to manufacture many things over the Asian countries or the countries that they tried to rule.
Yes. Thank you. Um, so it's just one of many examples where the English, for example, really just tried to impose their will upon India, on China, and so no wonder they were not that interested in sharing this information. Eventually, they did figure it out. They got either like they hired Chinese porcelain artists to come to Europe, and they worked there, and eventually the Europeans did learn how to make these like sort of traditional Chinese hard paste porcelain. So, but at first, the soft paste porcelain was an attempt to make Chinese porcelain, and it works. It's just not as good. Not that this is bad. I'm not going to say like this has a great deal of beauty to it. Okay. So here, for the last bit here, the this like French, like sort of like grandiose, elaborate French palace architecture was exported around Europe. Well, no, Versailles. I mean, this really like a lot of it is credited like starts with Louis XIV, but also continues in this period of Louis XV. The other European monarchs wanted what the French had, and so here's a palace in southern Germany, in Munich, that is this really like so. This guy Francois Soubily was originally from what is now Belgium, but he learned all this. He learned this. He learned how to learn this style of architecture and went to the German-speaking parts of Europe. It wasn't Germany as we know it now yet. And so he designed this palace in Nymphenburg. So here's the Versailles. And then here is Nymphenburg with this similar idea of the mirrors. But if you look at the way the ornament is just kind of like growing organic, it seems like it's growing organically and taking over the architecture to the point where it starts to obscure the architecture. And this is a Rococo feature. And you can see that there's a console table down the lower right, which looks like it has 4 legs, but it is meant to be up against the wall. The golden furniture kind of almost blends into the ornament too. And I love the way they've treated the ceiling, where it looks like it is just an exterior scene, and you're looking up into like sort of like trees and figures on the horizon, and you're looking up into the sky. So this is stucco. The technique of stucco is used here, which is carved plaster and then gilded. But this is very organic. You can see it's still using the little Amorini that goes back to really goes back to the Romans, but is very more prominent in the Renaissance, Italian Baroque. And all of this ornament. And, there is a little bit of what, I guess in some of this you can see these sort of like growing, the vines that grow along. It's not quite like the rinceau is this sort of like regular pattern. This is even like breaking out of that and making this just more like it's meant to look like it's realistic. So there's a greater deal of degree of realism to it. And that's that for the Rococo. I have here this. Very interesting. This is from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. This Louis XV sofa with chairs attached. The writing is kind of fun. Canapé à confidant, although a design less likely to encourage exchange of confidences, would be hard to imagine since the chairs are turned away from the sofa.
It looks like office furniture almost. It's the beginnings of office furniture.
It does. It's the waiting room outside of the monarch's office. But it is, it's interesting because it's a pretty elaborate piece of furniture, and from what the description says, pieces like this are very rare because a lot of them didn't. It's pretty large, and so not many of these make it to the present day. Now, I'll say a lot of these, but a lot of times the upholstery is not original because the upholstery would be would wear out a lot faster than the wood, and so a lot of these museum pieces are. Whoopsie, sorry about that. Trying to find that. So a lot of them are reupholstered in what like contemporary, like in a way that is most likely what it was like in its original state. Okay. All right, we're going to